Designated healer characters in video games are notorious for being completely unable to defend themselves. Most of the time, the self-defense weapons they get are more likely to annoy the enemy than actually harm them. PopCap decided to break this stereotype by giving one an assault rifle and a death laser, and the other a shotgun and grenades. I'm talking about Sunflower if that wasn't already obvious. Despite being the plant team's healer, she can still hold her own weight pretty well in comparison to other plants. I've calculated the rate of fire, damage per second, and time to kill of all the Sunflowers to see which of them are the best at not fulfilling their class role. As per usual, I've left timestamps in the description for you to skip to any specific part of the video, as well as a link to all my data if you want to read it yourself. I'd also recommend checking the comment section for any pinned comments, as I'll be using those to fix any mistakes in the video or clarifying anything I said. Before we get into the more important stuff, we got some basic stats to go over. First is ammo. Sunflower, Shadow Flower, and Metal Petal all have 50 ammo by default, with 60 with the upgrade. Power Flower and Stuffy Flower both have 10 less than that, and Fire Flower, Vampire Flower, and Sunflower all have 30 ammo by default. Fire Flower and Vampire Flower both get 35 with their upgrade, and Sunflower gets 36. Mystic Flower gets 18 ammo by default and 20 with the upgrade, and Alien Flower will always have 15 ammo, as she lacks an ammo upgrade. For reload, Sunflower, Metal Petal, Sunflower, and Stuffy Flower all have a 2-second reload by default and a 1.5-second reload with the upgrade. Fire Flower and Power Flower both have a 2.5-second reload by default with a 2-second reload with the upgrade. Vampire Flower has the shortest reload of 1.7 seconds by default and 1.3 seconds with the upgrade. Finally, Shadow Flower and Mystic Flower have a 2.7 second and 2.2 second reload respectively, and a 2.2 second and 1.7 second reload with the upgrade. For damage numbers, Sunflower, Power Flower, and Shadow Flower are all basically identical, dealing 10 damage in a headshot at long range and 12 at close range. Fire Flower and Vampire Flower have identical damage for the most part, however Vampire Flower does 10 damage on a headshot at close range, while Fire Flower only does 9. Stuffy Flower does near equal damage to Sunflower at close range, however she has greater falloff, causing her to deal less damage at longer ranges. Metal Petal deals 1 less damage at close range and 2 less damage at medium and long range. Sunflower does 16 damage at close range and 13 damage at long range, meaning her maximum possible damage per burst is 48. At close range, Mystic Flower deals 19 damage on a non-charged shot, 62 damage on a half-charged shot, and 80 damage on a full-charged shot. At long range, she deals 50 damage on a non-charged shot, 49 on a half-charge, and 53 on a full charge. Now that we're done with that, we can move on to rate of fire, or basically how fast each of the Sunflowers shoot. We need to get the character's rounds per minute, which you can calculate by dividing the amount of ammo in their clip by how fast they can empty that clip and multiplying by 60. Sunflower, Power Flower, and Fire Flower all have an identical 370 rounds per minute. Shadow Flower and Stuffy Flower both fire at 400 rounds per minute. Vampire Flower fires at 390 rounds per minute. Metal Petal fires at 350 rounds per minute. Alien Flower fires at 150 rounds per minute. And Mystic Flower fires at 320 rounds per minute. Sunflower has an overall rate of fire of 300 rounds per minute, but her individual bursts have a rate of fire of 740 rounds per minute. Damage per second allows us to see how each character performs over a period of time. The equation is in its name. You divide the total damage of a character by how long it takes them to empty a clip. Sunflower has a close-range DPS of 75.28 and a long-range DPS of 62.73. Fireflower is worse at all ranges, but that's to be expected considering she sacrifices direct damage for afterburn. Power Flower is literally identical to Sunflower. In fact, her only real downside is the 10 less ammo. Shadow Flower pretty predictably has a higher DPS, as like Power Flower, her only downside is less ammo, but Shadow Flower has a faster fire rate instead of electric damage, giving her a higher DPS. Mystic Flower's DPS is a bit too high. She'd actually take the top spot if it wasn't for a very specific mathematical convenience. But besides that, 100 damage per second at close range is certainly nothing to scoff at, considering she's a healer, PopCap! Metal Petal has a worse DPS at all ranges, but her extra 50 health tends to be more than enough to compensate in gunfights in my experience. Sunflower has a higher DPS than Sunflower, and considering her burst fire nature, she'll probably have an even bigger lead in time to kill as well. Alien Flower is an odd variant. Her DPS by itself actually takes the worst spot by a pretty significant margin. However, with her added AoE damage, she shoots up to the top spot for each range. Of course, her AoE won't always be that effective, as against airborne targets or targets that are fast enough, not all the damage will hit. So don't take that as the guaranteed DPS. Stuffy Flower has an average DPS at long and medium range, but she does better than default at close range. Vampire Flower has a lower DPS than default, but she has the added benefit of essentially decreasing the DPS of whoever she's fighting by 26, so you form your own opinions. Finally, we have time to kill. Time to kill is calculated two ways. One way is dividing the amount of damage you need to vanquish by your character's DPS, but this method doesn't work very well for more burst damage like characters like pea shooters and scientists. So instead what we have to do is multiply a character's attack and roll by one less than the amount of shots needed to deal enough damage to vanquish an enemy. Sunflower works as our basic average, and we'll compare the time to kill of all the other sunflowers to her. Fireflower is slower at all ranges, however due to being a fire variant, I gave her an extra line directly under her. Basically, to compensate for the fact that the fire damage will always deal an extra 25 damage after you stop shooting someone, this line will subtract 25 health from any health pool for its calculations. Despite this advantage, Fireflower only really breaks even or slightly improves at 75 and 100. Powerflower is identical to Sunflower at all ranges with no exception. This is why PopCap stopped making variants where the entire gimmick was elemental damage. Shadowflower is better in every situation except for close range 75, where she's just average. Metal Petal does worse in every range by about 20%. However, she also has 50% more health, so you do the math. Vampire Flower is worse at every range and health pool. However, her self heal obviously makes up for that. Stuffy Flower hits even at long and medium range, but she's faster at close range. Sun Pharaoh was a nightmare. To calculate her time to kill, I had to figure out how many of her shots were required to kill, then I had to figure out how many bursts were required, and if it wasn't a multiple of 3, I had to figure out how long that was, and then I had to add in the time between the bursts, which varied depending on how many shots were required and if it was a full burst or not, and I had to do that 15 times! Ugh. Alien Flower by herself takes the worst spot for every range and health pool, but with her AoE, she actually manages to take the best spots for a lot of health pools. Of course, this is assuming that the entirety of the AoE hits each time, so it's not entirely accurate. Mystic Flare, on the other hand, but in all seriousness, I grayed out the line with her charge included due to it being too situational. But considering she'd have all the top spots if it wasn't for Alien Flower, saying she's overpowered is a bit of an understatement. So that was Sunflower. As I said earlier, I've left links to my data in the description if you want to check that yourself, and make sure to check for any pinned comments where I'll be making corrections for any mistakes I may have made. Now that we're 4 characters in, I'm going to be doing a bit of an intermission episode next, where I'll be going over the health sources. I'd also like to quickly apologize for not making any videos for like 2 months. I gotten very burned out on Garden Warfare due to grinding out chompers, which, if you ever want an excuse to not play Garden Warfare 2, try mastering all the chompers for like a week. It is not a pleasant experience. But I'm back now, so expect more videos soon.